You're listening to Electrolysis Unplugged, where we bring you real talk and real tools for thriving in this profession. I'm Stephanie, and with my co-host Joanie here, today's episode we're tackling two essentials: making sure your consent forms and intake forms actually serve your practice, building the confidence to bring your pricing and credentials to the table. From streamlining safety questions to quiet imposter syndrome, this episode is packed with practical mindset tools so that you can start using them today.
Hello, everyone.
We had some good questions come through, and we started talking about this a little bit last week as like a teaser to this week, which was talking about the consent forms. But we wanted to dive into like navigating consent forms / intake forms, imposter syndrome in the electrology industry and allied industries. So that's kind of going to be the main topic of the evening. So I want to welcome everybody back to listening to us. We're diving into these really important topics because the fact is like so many of us work by ourselves in a little space where we question everything we're doing because we usually don't have someone to be like, are you also doing this unless you're in this space? So these questions are really important to go over with you guys because then you won't feel so alone. And maybe you won't feel like an imposter anymore.
That's right. These issues are what every practitioner encounters at some point. So I remember struggling with it early on. I mean, when I started, I was 17 years old. So I'll always remember, by the way, side story, but one of my first clients from those days, she said that the day that I came into her consultation, she could tell I was super young, but I had my little lab coat and I was like real ready to get started, So a lot of it is about kind of how you portray yourself, and I'm sure we'll get into that too. But we're excited to share kind of what we've learned and, offer any advice if anybody's feeling overwhelmed.
I love it. I'm here for it. Let's dive into these answers and we'll get some of these questions settled maybe a little bit more.
We'll see, right?
Yeah.
So a member recently asked, is there a standard consent form that we should be using for the industry? And I feel like that is such a great question. It comes up again and again. So Steph, what's your thoughts?
So it really depends on like what services you're offering. However, in electrolysis, key elements like risk, potential side effects, explanation of the process is like kind of essential. These forms are about setting those clear expectations and covering both you and the client legally. So it's really important. Last year, about midway through the year, we talked about consent forms. We talked about intake forms. And so there's a couple courses up there that I really do feel like would help you guys in that, which one of them was just intake forms in the world of insurance. But I feel like you could take that big picture intake form and scale it back and be able to make something that's uniquely your own.
Yeah, I believe that we have two courses available. One is about the kinds of stuff that we need on intake forms if you take insurance, which is great if you're going that route, so paramedical stuff. The other one that you did about halfway through the year, I believe it's just a 1 credit unit course. So it's just a 1 hour. And that one is documentation and charting. So if you're always questioning yourself, do I need this? Do I need that? I think that would be an important purchase to make just to kind of get the basic understanding, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know about you, but part of my students' coursework assignments is literally charting. I want to see your assignment every day, what you did in that space. The reason I'm getting used to that is you need to document and know who that person is, where they're coming from, what's changed. You can't just like say, I'm just going to like leave it to the wind. That's not okay.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. The question is too, is like, where do you find these forms, right? A lot of us kind of make up our own as we go, and it's been a curated thing over, it's been of how many years you found one here. So I know the distribution centers like Aesthetic Systems will sell some forms. You can also end up making your own, but it's not always tailored to every business, right? Which is why we kind of end up customizing everything.
Yeah, we have on Zapmaster's distribution website, we have one that's very generic, like It is like a $5 form kind of thing, or $10 form kind of thing, where you just go in there, you print off the PDF, you call it a day. Okay, it's a digital download. It is super generic in my opinion, and I would say that mine adapts every year, and sometimes more than once in a year when I find something that it never made sense to have it there, but I thought I would include it, and then you kind of go back and rework it. In the past, I think if Tony's in here, I remember seeing her earlier. I made her one when she first started with me, where it was like we went through and we put what her services were, her service rates, her cancellation policies. And of course, I lean in with like the recommendations, and I'm willing to do that for any person, but that's like, it's got to pertain to your area, to your space. So it does require a lot of consulting to create such a customized one, but I'm always down to do it because it's kind of a fun assignment for me. And if you guys go onto my website, and you look at like the service side of things, you can actually see that I have a digital intake there. And I can show you guys at the end of this what my current app one looks like through Jotform, so that you guys can kind of get a good handle on that. But that's like my newest one, and it's always live, and I always get to go in there and edit it, and I love it. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah.
So-
And then people will ask, I know that the form is really expansive. And so do all the details really need to be included? So what's relevant, what's not, so kind of understanding what information is necessary on a form is also an important thing.
I mean, we know that not every detail is necessary. Like, for example, if you're offering basic electrolysis, you might not think that you need questions about like laser treatments or like injectables or chemical peels and microdermabrasion, that kind of stuff. But they could be relevant to your treatment plan. If, say, for example, somebody's undergoing some anti-aging treatments in the middle of their electrolysis sessions, and they are part of like the same areas that you're going to be working, I think that it's important to have some of those light items on there. If you don't, you kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You're setting yourself up for a disastrous basic understanding of that client.
There's been a couple questions dropped in the chat. So the first one was, do other states have certain requirements with intake or / consent forms?
Sometimes. So what's interesting is from my understanding, it's not necessarily the state, but it's the insurance companies that are covering within that space that are the bigger challenge. So when you're doing an intake form, for example, when we first started creating like a more detailed intake form back when I was early in my practice, I remember us hiring a lawyer to make sure that we were covered to our state's standards and our insurance standards, because I wasn't an unlicensed state. So in your head, you think, oh, well, there's no standard, right? If you're unlicensed, there's no standard. Washington is an unlicensed state, but we do have revised codes that you have to adhere to if you are practicing. So it's kind of like a stepping stone into licensure. And I think that it's really important for people to understand that you could hire a cheap insurance company that doesn't have high requirements for you. But if something were to go sideways, and it doesn't even need to be like something has actually happened to the client, but if a accusation of wrongful treatment, wrongful doing has happened, and you're not covered, and you don't have consent forms signed, it's your word against theirs. And I think that that's kind of like, you need to find out what your insurance company is asking of you, because that part is incredibly important. So even if you're in a unlicensed space or an unregulated country, I think that it's important to have that in there.
This episode is sponsored by Silhouette Tone, a global leader in electrolysis equipment and aesthetic technology. From advanced depilators to full spa solutions, Silhouette Tone empowers professionals to deliver safe and effective treatments with innovation at every step. Discover their electrolysis equipment and more at silhouettetone.us.
So the takeaway here is to customize your consent form to your services, obviously. But if you're unsure, you need to check your state regulatory body. So in California, for example, Board of Barbering Cosmetology might have something to say about the kinds of charts that we keep. Maybe they don't, but it's where you would check. You would also check with your insurance company. So like you said, insurance company to me will have the bigger say in what kind of documents you should keep for that sort of thing. And then if you want to be extra sure, then you need legal counsel. So you might refer to some sort of law firm in your area to see what type of documentation you should keep on hand, because they would know the types of lawsuits that might come up against a practitioner like you. So think about like med spa owner, it might be, or, might be what they were used to, but not quite to that degree. But if it could happen to them, they could tell you the types of forms that you should have. So something as basic, like you just mentioned, as a consent form, right? Saying that they understand the risks and the side effects and that they're okay with it.
It's informed consent. That's like, there was a question in the chat, and I'm going to go over this in just a second because I do see it, but this is informed consent. And so what that means is you understand that there are inherent risks that could be involved with the services that you are inquiring about and wanting to have done, and yet you are still proceeding forward. Informed consent is using a medication off-label that's prescribed by your doctor, but understanding that all of those side effects could actually happen to you. And I think that the train is like going crazy right now. I think that's important to understand that if you don't take that step into there, it is always going to be their word against yours. And unfortunately, this world is pretty litigious, because we're looking out for our best interest, as the individual, maybe not as a community whole, and we don't understand the impacts of that. And people think that you make tons of money, that you're just scrolling away the dough when you have a med spa, or you have a laser in your practice, or you have a $10,000 electrolysis machine. They think that that money is just like pouring out of you. And it's not that you don't do well for yourself, but we don't make money like the companies that make these things do.
They think, oh, you charge $120 an hour, so you must be, like rolling in the dough every day. And it's like,
I was planning on doing some snow angels and some money.
Yeah.
As for like the question in the chat, like jot forms, is it a monthly fee or jot form? You can do a monthly fee or you can do a bulk fee. I will say that I have to use the HIPAA compliant jot form like process. So my SOAP notes and the contracting companies that so I do consulting for other electrologists in my area, along with my medical director, where they can provide insurance-based care in their practice, but we take on a lot of the heavy lifting. And so my forms can go out to all of them and it will resubmit to me, which then I can send out to my medical biller. And it was worth the investment on my side. And I think I paid close to $1,000 for the year. But if you think about how much you pay for example, Vigaro or any Gloss Genius or any of the other ones, and you have forms included in that, there is usually a monthly fee involved in that. And mine's already set up. And because I work with students, I'm not using something like a Vigaro. I'm using something like Fresha, where it is a free service for booking in that space. But on the charting side of things, I did need the extra buffers. And so Jot, for the price that I pay, I have up to 100 forms. I can turn them into apps, so I can put them on tablets in the office. And the students can chart on that if they wanted to. That's a newer feature. The students actually haven't gotten to do that yet, but I have it all set up for them to be able to. They can chart in something like Fresha, but if they want to see what it's like to be charting at my level, it's going to be a little bit different, right? So they can go into those spaces, and then it auto emails it to me. It's password protected. It's locked down, and it has that little HIPAA logo on it, so it gives some comfort to that client in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And if something happens where I have to change the form, I literally can go in there at any given moment, change it, and the next form is good to go.
Yeah, I do electronic forms too. Mine are actually through Vagaro, and it's like an extra $10 a month to do the forms. But I can do any different types of forms. So I have waivers. I have a form to request insurance cards where people can upload photos. You can request credit card information. So there's a lot of different types of forms that you can make.
Mhm.
So, but it's nice to be able to have an e-form, I think, because again, you can update it, you can change it. I recently changed my cancellation policy from 24 hours to 48 hours. So I sent everybody out a notice of a new policy that all of my existing clients, as they booked their appointments, had to sign. That was automatic. And then I was able to just go into my intake form and update all that language. And so it's nice to be able to just kind of boom, boom, and it's just across the board, all updated.
That is something I absolutely love about like the start of a new year is sending out a mass email to everybody saying, hey, these are the changes. If you are having services by us, this is what to expect. This is the form I want you to fill out. And yes, I will have you do it yearly because people don't, if they've seen you for multiple body areas and they filled out that form 10 years ago, and now we're working on like, I don't know, nose hair, it's not the same. And so
Mm.
we need to be able to update that as things happen. I mean, think about how many times your doctor has been like, hey, I'm putting you on this random medication. I want that update. There is a couple other questions in here.
So some of it kind of went along with what we were talking about legal consultations. And so lawyers will be able to tell you the proper language to put into your consent forms. And that's important. And then that
Mhm.
Lydia said that her insurance company actually asked her for a copy of her patient consent form. So you see, they definitely have a lot to say about how we do business. And I feel like, you don't really want, but they won't seek it out unless you maybe have a problem or are actively trying to find out the right way to do it. Most of the
Yes.
times, if you hear from your insurance company, it's when it's time to sign for a renewal and they want more money, right? It's happened.
Yes.
So,
I'm like, oh, my favorite time of year. Yeah.
and as far as, and Lydia, I think this kind of goes with e-form. So where do clients sign? Well, e-signatures are pretty much accepted across the board now as a pretty standard thing. So anytime you have some sort of program with like DocuSign or Adobe Sign or anything like that, even if they're just typing their name, this electronic signature is very legally binding and valid.
It's on that e-signature component. If you were collecting funds, there's a secondary. So, say, for example, you're collecting someone's credit card in your forms, because I remember there being, it's been a while since I played on Vagaro, so correct me if this has changed, but I remember there being a spot where you can receive basically a coin, where you are taking their credit card and you're putting it in a file, but it's not, you don't see their credit card. It's just a
Yeah.
cached version of it.
Yeah.
And then if they no-show their appointment, you can go and then charge according to your fees, structures, and that you've talked about that they've signed off on.
Yes.
Um, Sometimes that's a bit of a pain in the butt because if people are ones to back out of paying for things that they're supposed to pay for, they could tell their bank that,
Sure. Chargebacks are, you're rarely going to win a
yeah,
chargeback. That's a hard thing
yeah,
to fight. Even if you have proof. That happened once here at the school. Somebody was unhappy with the service she got from a student because they were going too slow. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, this is what you get when you come to a school.
mhm,
And no, I'm not giving you, it's $20 an hour. Like, go home, you're done, But she's like, well, I'm just going to do a chargeback. And I just told her, you know what? You're going to do what you feel like you got to do and you go away. And so she did. And it's funny because we had a full on report. We had screenshots of the cameras in the school showing her signing off at the front desk, on the iPad. She was signing as the transaction went through, laying down in the classroom, getting worked on, and they still did the chargeback. And so I'm just like, I don't know what else, So I feel like you never win those things. I'm sorry.
no, and that is the harder part about owning your own business is that sometimes they're they're not protecting necessarily the business, they're usually protecting the consumer, and even if they know the consumer
Lying.
is lying, I'm like, "Yeah, let's be, like,
Let's
real
be real.
transparent with
Yeah.
that. Let's be real." But we know that, and
Yes.
it's a bummer, but that could happen in any industry. That's not electrology specific, that's just a, "Hey, if money is, um, like, shared back and forth. You could have that on Venmo and Zelle too. People be mad that they have,
Sure. But
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. If you don't even have an intake form for the client, as far as them coming in for any kind of service, or say, I was never told this, and there's no consent forms that were signed or anything like that, you wouldn't even have a leg to stand on. So at the very least, you need to start with that.
Yeah. Will not put my hands on a person without forms being signed, dated, and filled out to their entirety. I can't.
It's funny. I was going through, so sometimes at the office, I'll go through some of the consultations. We have a file that is just for consultations, so people that came and then never rebooked. And so I'll go through and I'll look at the notes, right? And there was one, and the client at the top, it said client refused consultation, so I refused to do treatments. And I was like, good for you. That's exactly what you need to do. It's one of those moments where the client was like, I know everything, I don't need this, blah, blah, blah. And then with no consultations, and I've told them many times, if no consultations, if they don't adhere to the way we do things, they don't listen, they don't pay attention, they refuse to upload their ID cards, to sign whatever form or whatever it is, then they are not a customer for us,
No. There's a great question. Where does a client sign? And just so everybody knows, I am totally down for buying refurbished stuff. I don't need to have the newest thing, but I got iPad mini, like the tiny ones from like 5-10 years ago, refurbished from a Groupon. And you can sign on there. You can have them in the office. They don't even have to be in like an iCloud unless you're trying to download apps. So what I tend to do is I only put the client-facing form on those and give that outbound. So they don't have the pictures in the office. They don't have anything that could possibly, if I handed off a iPad to somebody, they could get into something they shouldn't. But they can get into my intake forms repeatedly and my soap notes, but the blank version of it. And I have seen people go into the soap note and they're like, I'm in the wrong thing. And I'm getting like updates because somebody went and it's like, okay, stop it.
Oops.
Beautiful.
So I guess if we're kind of going into simplifying our intake forms, another member had asked, do you include every medical question on your intake form?
I personally include a lot of medical questions that pertain to hair problems or services and or procedures that somebody might go through that would impact their treatment plan. So I know that we both had this on our units, but on a pro, there was that feature. But like for me, I am going to add my contraindications on my forms. I'm going to add if you're having an upcoming medical procedure. We talked about this in the PCOS course, where I talked about all the medications that could cause hypertrichosis and medications that could help with hypertrichosis or hirsutism that are androgen blocking. And I have those on my new forms, which are phenomenal. All the products that you could possibly ever have put on your face in my office are on there as well, and what they do and why we use them, so that they can say yes and no, we can use those products on them, and then I know what can be done going forward. That's a great one. Eileen says that we ask what age do they experience increased growth. Fantastic. I know that you guys all know this, but there is a component to this where people just don't remember. It just feels like it's ever present. But part of that is when you're 12 and you have the onset of hair growth, there were so many other things happening during that time. You didn't think about it being 12. But if you start to ask, like, did you start feeling worse about your hair during your menses or that kind of stuff? It helps build that understanding. I think that's
about investigating a little bit for sure.
History.
Yeah. I think it's so important to know why you're asking certain questions. So let's say if we go back to the example. So she bought the Dectro intake form from Aesthetic Systems, right? They sell them as a pack of 50. It's just on a cardboard thing. And honestly, I think that it has less questions than what I asked, definitely less questions than what your form has. But it has a lot of these like medical disorders and diseases and things like that. And so what prompted this question was like, is this really necessary? Do I need to know if you're diabetic? Does that matter, right? Or do I need to know that you have high blood pressure or that you're on this med or that med? I think that when you have an intake form like this, you have to go through and understand why we're even asking. Usually I'll tend to categorize most disorders as like a healing issue, right? Is it that whatever you have makes it so that you don't heal so well? It's not so much about the disorder itself, but it's what it's causing in your body, right? Or do you have some sort of disorder that makes you more photosensitive or just sensitive in general, right? Do you have something that makes it so that, what's something else? So healing is a big one, something that is going to be, let's say, fighting against the results, right? So PCOS that's not under control, or you're taking minoxidil and you don't know why it's sprouting, right? So little things like this that maybe is not conducive to, it's not that I don't do the work anyway, but it's definitely something that we need to discuss as we're doing the consultation. So sometimes also like this was not an argument, but we'll use that loosely, but we kind of had an argument about why do I care if you have like, and I probably say this like the diabetes commercial, but like phlebitis.
Nope.
Like, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But so it's blood clots in the veins in the legs, right? So why does that matter, right? And so you ask me this, and of course I have to Google everything down to its root in the English language. And so what I had deduced was that these people tend to be contraindicated against things like massage, for example, or any kind of like lymphatic thing or like pressure directly on the legs. Now, why would that be? Well, because you could dislodge the clot and then the clot could travel to your heart or your brain and you can have a stroke or heart attack, right?
Right.
So what if you're doing treatments on the leg and you're palpitating that area? Right? So somebody asks, okay, so why does it matter if you put that on there? Well, it matters because if you're working on the legs, that might be an issue. Right? So it's always about kind of finding the root cause as to why is it that it's important to know. Now, if I'm working on their face, does it matter? Probably not. And that goes down to understanding what it is and probably, customizing to a certain extent.
I mean, 2-3 weeks ago, actually probably just before the holidays. So a few weeks ago, I had a consultation come in for the students who was very enthusiastic that we were a school, that we did gender affirming care. They had been just kind of like in limbo for a long time. And so as we got to talking, immediately looking at them, I saw a lot of present, visible health issues that they were faced with. But one of the big ones that we saw was from the knees down, the skin was so taut and cracking, discolored, like asphyxiated, like where it just looked like it could not breathe. And so we got to talking and they're like, oh, my doctor doesn't even let me shave my legs. And I'm like, well, I can't do electrolysis in good conscience if you can't even run a razor over the top of your legs. If I'm putting a filament into there and a student's putting a filament into there where we have a little less accuracy when we're getting going, that risk becomes higher and higher. And so they were like, I get it. It just was a real pain in the butt that I had to like let my hair grow, but it's okay. Can I work in? And then they wanted to work on their face. And I was like, yes. And then they were like, but I'm currently seeing my oncologist because my cancer is back. And I was like, hold on. That was not on your form. So let's backtrack a little bit further. What is currently happening with your body? And when your cancer is back and you're talking to your oncologist, what are you currently doing or recently have done or hoping to recently do? Because I know I want to be able to provide you affirming care. That's my goal, right? But I don't want to be the reason that you're 6 feet under.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that electrolysis would, take somebody out, but I'm saying that somebody with so many compromised things, I need to start asking myself, is the risk worth the reward for them? And would my insurance company cover it? Would my medical director be okay with it? And so I brought it back to my medical director and he's like, that was a really good move. I would not have touched this person in this space during that time because there's so many things going on. And that's outside of my scope. I'm looking at this going, holy buckets, we got to do something about this because I want to help, but I physically can't at that point. And it breaks my heart, but it's something you got to do. So it is there all the time. In the chat, they said also allergies are a huge thing that you have to ask. Allergies are a big component to this. Down to like, do you have a nickel allergy? If I'm using a stainless steel probe and I'm heating it up and softening that, the molecules let's talk. It's not like you're wearing costume jewelry where nothing's happening. You're conducting energy alongside of that.
Yeah. So the question doesn't, if the question is, if it doesn't impact service or safety, sure, you can skip it. But again, I think that when you're putting together your intake forms, there's a purpose for everything that's there. There's a really, like the Excel Pro has that integrated client management system, right? So Stephanie, I know you and your mom used it a lot at your practice in Arizona, but it's also very limited, right? So if you're talking about a limited type of intake form, this is probably about as limited as it gets.
Yeah.
Everything from there is a step up. Do we have to do intake like doctors? Well, maybe only if you're going to be seeing insurance patients.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about finding kind of the happy medium between the two. So you probably want to go through the different types of contraindications that go along with what we do, and then build your intake form based on that. Right. So we ask for a reason. I definitely think that, again, some maybe asking about, clots in your legs is not relevant if you're working on the face, but maybe they filled out that form when they came in for their chin. It's 4 years later now, and now they're interested in getting their legs done.
Yeah.
Right. Oftentimes we don't revisit the intake form. We don't have them refilled a new intake form as the years pass and things change. And so you might forget that, like, sure, that wasn't relevant back then because we're not working on the legs, but maybe that's something that is taken up later on.
And that should be like at the start of your treatment with a patient, the updates of what would happen with their health history. So your intake form is like the start, right? But once services have been rendered and you go back to charting, at the start of a session, a lot of times what I do in those spaces is before we even talk about your life and get those updates from you on a personalized level, I need to know what happened from last service to this service. And so there is a live intake that happens at the start of every service in the sense of, were there any changes? Like if you think of a SOAP, so like the subjective side, what are you wanting me to do today? Because it might change, right? Objective, what do I see? What am I gonna do? The assessment of the areas, so like taking it in and getting to know what was the root cause of this. What do I think is going to be an outcome in this space? And then the plan portion, what are we doing today and next time, right? Or in the next few? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like the longer I'm doing this for work, while I have a good memory of like the interpersonal things, if you told me that you got a new cat or something like that, that sits with me, right? But the stuff that is your medical history, when I see, a whole bunch of other people, is not going to always stick. And so I feel as though I rely back on that style of intake when I am charting, when I am getting to know the service. So when you're setting up your machine, you know what your baseline should be based on the moment. Because those levels from last time, I know we've talked about this in the past, they're not today's levels. They are where we ended last time, and they might be within a range that we can work within, but they were that days, that environment, that moment in time. And today we have a new story in front of us. And you got to read that story.
That's right. And it takes time. I know that it's easy to kind of piggyback off of the last appointment and just kind of go off from there. But it takes experience, to get into the groove. I don't usually reference my last session settings because, like you said, it doesn't really matter. Honestly, when I sit down, I just kind of start afresh. And so I never really, it doesn't matter what I did before. You kind of made me laugh a little bit because you were like, I don't remember your medical history and things like that. There are times when I forget that we had started a whole different area, what we worked on. So I'll sit there and she's like, I'm like, did we work on your bikini? Did you start your bikini? Or was that someone else? They all blur together.
Why is this so hairless?
Yeah. Did I do this? I don't remember that, and so, and it doesn't matter if it's like, sometimes it can be some pretty private areas. And so I feel like if I'm like, oh, we worked back there, I don't remember that, they might feel like, okay, that's good. Maybe they're not like, it's not like it's becoming ingrained in my brain. I just tend to like, one bikini versus another. It doesn't matter anymore.
Right. You seem one
them all.
like, I mean, yes, every Brazilian is as unique as the person's fingerprints. Yes.
Yeah.
I do not remember what they look like. And I won't, because there's some dissociation that happens to be able to provide services across the board for a bunch of people. You kind of have to like look at us as a bunch of meat suits that you can manipulate the skin and kill the hair, right? And I love this comment here. It's a really good reason to use the electronic scheduling and the records, because if you look at the person's history, you can see the dates without having to pull charts. I know I've talked about this in the past, but I remember hiring someone that could not alphabetize when we had paper charts. That was the end. That was the end of me ever wanting to pull a paper chart ever again. I was having to have people refill out stuff so much.
I've also never wanted like the thick. I hate when my files get too thick.
Ooh,
because then you can't find anything in it, So like a lot of my insurance files, because I'm not completely electronic.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I had a meeting today with a medical biller and he's just like, so how would I know if this was, surgical prep referral or face referral? And I was like, it's written down in the file. I know you're in Bangladesh, but let me figure this out,
Oh,
So, yes. So the process of trying to become like electronic down to even the charting, like I'm still very much on paper. I have electronic files, but we print them out, so I don't know. Maybe that's just, I'm an elder millennial, so grew up a little bit without computers. So part of it is like, I love it and hate it. I also get kind of lost when it's all electronic. It's harder for me to categorize it. It's when it's in paper and I can kind of spread it in front of me. I know what I'm looking at. So,
well, I think about like when you and I are kind of like doing some our admin stuff for E2C, getting stuff prepared for them. I think about that component of like, I know you've seen me do this when we're like doing our digital like meetups, where I will pull out a piece of paper because I will remember when I've written it down, and then I take that and I have to type it in because I'm not going to go back to the book that I wrote that down in. I have to then type it.
No, that I'll forget where it's written down. So yeah.
Don't even look at my desk. The back half of my desk is not for the faint of heart. It is, my doom piles blew up. I'm looking at it right now. Mistakes happen, so definitely difficult there.
Want to keep learning on your own time? The Electrology Education Coalition offers a growing library of home study courses covering advanced techniques, ethics, business planning, and more. Earn CEUs, stay sharp, and continue building your skills. Explore the catalog at electrologycoalition.com.
Well, I think one of the big things is like if it doesn't impact like, your service, your safety, but it does impact like your health. So allergies, keep in mind that you will need to know these things at some point in their journey with you.
I think you can probably keep it slim to like the most common types of disorders, but I would have a space for them to fill in anything that maybe isn't on there that then you can just kind of research also.
Oh yeah. That's how I find out about like stuff like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it would be impossible to have an intake form that covers everything out there. And honestly, that would just be crazy.
Oh yeah. I think that making it, there should be sections where it is required. If you're doing digital, you have required sections and then you have non-required. Just the other day, we had an intake form come through and they did nothing but the signature. And I realized I had not turned on the required and the parts that I wanted. And it was on the medical side of things. And I was like, what are you doing? So
that's not going to work.
That's not going to work. So I had to go back there and I'm like, sorry, that you actually did nothing. And they're like, oh, it was required. I mean, yes, absolutely. So just know that you should be doing back and forth.
So the last part of the question from this member came and it was talking about imposter syndrome.
Eesh.
And so imposter syndrome is kind of interesting because it's kind of that lack of confidence that we have in our skills and our abilities. And then this guilt that comes with that about charging a certain rate, about, passing yourself off as a professional when you feel like you're not.
Yeah.
So it's funny because this member said that like I used to roll my eyes when people talked about imposter syndrome and now I'm just like knee deep in it, So what do I do?
Yeah.
So they shared, I feel like I'm not good enough to charge for my services yet. How do I handle this?
That's a hard one. So we know like it's a struggle. One, you're not alone. Two, I would even go as far as to say is I'm going to be really transparent here. I still struggle with it from time to time when I'm doing something new, especially in this last 2 years where I'm doing everything is so out of my norm in the sense of new in my life that it was rearing its ugly face a lot in that time frame, down to like our conversations when I was sitting for my licensing exams and getting back into that stuff. I was just like, I remember telling you when I was driving into work one day, I'm like, I don't know.
What
Like,
if I fail? Yeah.
what if I fail? People
And I'm like,
I suck.
Stephanie, you're being crazy.
She's like, chill out. I have no chill. The chill is not present. So it's imposter syndrome is like incredibly common. I love that we have a name for it that we are actually using now. It's so common when you're first starting out. You've trained hard, you're certified, you're trained, you're licensed, you're here. Like just mentorship alone. Let's throw out the fact that you have not gotten certified, you have not gotten licensed because of wherever you're at, right? You took the step to be here, which is you saying, I understand that I could do something different. And that should negate all of those negative moments. You kick butt, and you should remember that. So you're providing a valuable service that you trained hard for. So like focus on your strengths, utilize that positive impact in that space. When you don't have a positive impact, lean on your community for cheerleading. Okay. That you have a positive impact in the clients' lives that you are part of.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop.
And it will pass. The experience comes. I think that sometimes it's that initial start, that first dive, that's just the most intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so you can't think about it too much. I used to tell students a lot, just fake it until you make it, and I once had somebody was like, that just doesn't sound like good advice. And I was just like, well, then you haven't been in a place where you felt like you were just super inadequate. So it's important to act like how you feel you should feel in that moment. So you act like you've seen it all, you've done it all. Yeah. It helps to instill confidence in your skills. And sometimes it's like affirmations, right? It's like saying things to yourself in the mirror and one day you believe it. But I think it's important to, go in with a sense of confidence, even if it's slightly false confidence in the beginning, up until you build that experience that, kind of proves that, yes, you were worthy. It was, you were skilled enough. You did a good job type of thing.
You just made me think of Wayne's World. I'm not worthy. You're worthy. You got this. I love this. Your time is precious and valuable. You are a whole human, a whole one. And your presence on this earth is doing a beautiful thing by impacting others in ways that you have a talent that you went and like curated into something beautiful that you could showcase to the entire world. There are parts of you that you can't duplicate, obviously. Can you duplicate an electrologist? You can make more, but every electrologist out there, you and I are same age, been doing the same amount of time. I can guarantee that we are not the same technician.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of a cool thing. I think that's what makes us good friends is that we can bounce off and be like, girl, what you doing?
Yeah. And I think that new practitioners shouldn't compare themselves too much with people that have been in the business, 10, 15, 20 years, because you'll just have to make your path, towards that direction. But, it's you learn from mentors, from people that have more experience, and that's part of it. But comparing yourself, like, I'm not as fast as them. Of course you're not. You're brand new.
Yes.
And that's perfectly okay.
I love this. Do you think, so Gabby, I'm calling you out, girlfriend, because I love this so much. Do you think it's better to be transparent about your level of experience with a client, expressing that you're a recent graduate? Yes.
Yes.
Not only a yes, but a big yes, because if you are transparent, they will trust you amongst any other thing that you do for them. People, unless you're an actor, people know when they're being fed a lie in some way. And that fake it till you make it is not your talent. It is your confidence that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's important. And I agree with the comments here that people can lie regarding all their hairs came back. And I saw the other day, one of our colleagues just got like a unruly, like a person that was complaining and went on Google, and then they took their Google review down and then put it back up there with like 3 words. And it's like, come on, like, yeah, get a hobby at that time. One, but you know, that can really break someone's morale, especially when they're trying to do is provide you a service. Now, if you really felt as though you were not like, for the clients that listen to this, like what later down the road when it's like on the podcast, like if you feel as though your electrologist is not serving you correctly, the very first thing that you can do for yourself is honestly talk to your electrologist. If you're an electrologist that doesn't feel like you can talk to your clients clearly, that's not the client for you. You have to have that transparency.
So sometimes new practitioners will struggle with setting their rates because of imposter syndrome, right? So this was kind of actually 2 questions. We had 2 separate questions, and both of them kind of addressed this sort of topic. So pretty much they just kind of want to know, like, how do the going rate for wherever they are is $110 an hour and up. And so they think I cannot ethically charge that because I'm just too new. I'm fresh out of school. So her dilemma was, how do I charge what I feel like a beginner should make without jeopardizing the confidence that my clients have in me, right? So that kind of goes into, do I tell people that I'm new and out of school? I can tell you, I don't think that it undermines their confidences in you as much as you think. Yes, there are people that will seek out those with the most amount of experience. But I have a salon that has, and I hire fresh out of school. And their schedules get just as full as somebody with more experience. So there are clients for everyone. But I do not charge the same rate for my new people as I do for somebody with more experience. So it goes both ways.
I mean, I want you to think about it. That was my question and dilemma. I'm glad that you're asking this. When someone starts off, I don't know if you had a chance to listen last week, but I talked about the pricing structure that I recommend to like new grads. And it's very similar to doing a Groupon. So it's like an in-house Groupon. This is not a pitch on that company. It's just what I'm talking about here. So when you first kick off, and your colleagues, as long as you are advertising in a way that like is very transparent, this is what I'm doing to build my books, they cannot argue with this. And you're not being unethical, but take that time to do like that first month where you're doing like a free consult and 75% off to 50%, depending on what the rates are in your area. And then that second month, and I would book all 4 of these months when I'm saying this, that second month, whatever the frequency of the appointment is, you're going to book them a little bit more expensive. So it's going to be like 75 to then 50% off. And then that third month is going to be like 25% off. And you can make these scales different. You don't have to go as high or as low as I'm talking in these moments. And that 4th month, that's when you're full price. What it's going to do during this time is you've given grace to yourself while you're getting your wiggles out. You're not as confident. So you got to like get that like jitters out of your system so that you can feel better. Okay. So as a starting point, if you give yourself a soft place to land, it also encourages your clients when you are slower because your volume has been less because you've only been in school to stick with you. But in booking them a treatment plan in a 4-month window, especially for face work, we're not talking about like leg work, back and chest, because that stuff has like longer growth periods of their total life cycle. But I would say face, bikini. These are your clients where you're going to be doing probably the most amount of it, and take that opportunity to build them in that structure. By the time the fourth month rolls around, that surge of regrowth in like the new growth, regrowth kind of combination where you get that big burst is something that they can actually see tangible. Like they actually have it. And now they're encouraged to keep paying you money because you gave them that time to feel you out. And I don't know about you, but I think that we are at a really cool point in this world that while you and I have been at this for a while, and there are other electrologists that have been at this for a while, the surge in new electrologists is actually making it better for you as an electrology student because most of your competition in your area that would be accepting new clients are all new electrologists or nearly new.
Yeah. I mean, if you have, issues with, or you're scared to start kind of off on your own, you should always know that there might be an option. I don't know your area, I don't know what's available, but there might be an option for you to start as an employee. And sometimes that allows you to kind of get those quote unquote wiggles out the first 6 months under somebody else's wing. So usually, like we talked about your type of pricing structure, I've recommended that students that start, let's say your own business, introduce themselves to the market as and do a grand opening discount. And maybe you put, not maybe, you put an end date to that discount. This is not something that you're going to carry on for 3 years. You can make it a steep discount. And so the rate that you're charging then maybe reflects what you feel your skills are worth. I can tell you 3 months, you're going to be just going like, oh my God, I don't know, what am I doing? This is crazy. Like everything's going to be crazy. 6 months in, you're like, okay. A year in, usually you're like, all right, I got this.
Yeah.
So you have to just get through that first year. At my salon, it's tiered pricing depending on years of experience. And when somebody calls and asks why the different prices, I just say that it's due to speed and experience. That's it. I don't need to tell them, well, this one just graduated a month ago. Like, unless, if they ask directly, I won't lie.
Yeah.
But there's no need to say like, I'm like super newbie, So grand opening, your new business. If they ask, you can say, yeah, sure, I graduated from school, 6 months ago or something like that. If they're not liking that, then they can go somewhere else, somebody else's client.
And I mean, you can do it at a smaller scale. You can do the grand opening, you can do packages when you kick off and that kind of stuff. Like there is so many ways. And I understand why, like when our question askers in the chat. So like, when it comes down to like in your current location, everyone is solo, you were highly discouraged to do discounts. I remember when we started doing, and you all can come for me with pitchforks if you want to, but when we started doing Groupons to build technician books, it gave this moment where people could come in, pay a basic rate for their first service, and we put it as a one service max or 3 service max at the time. And it gave us our database.
Let me ask you though, Steph, what was the retention rate for those clients? That was always my biggest thing because the Groupon, you get the deal people, right? They're looking for the cheapest deal around. And so that's the type of people you get. But how many of them actually like stuck to and finished a project?
So when it came to electrolysis, it was high. When it came to Botox and Juvederm, it was one-offs.
Okay.
When it came to laser, the 3 service package was probably the most popular. And then because we usually would sell packages of three appointments or 3 service areas. Okay. And so you can kind of like stack that in different ways. You still had good retention because electrolysis is and laser is such a coveted skill that it was important. I will say that I've considered it for like us, but the thing is I'm not really doing daily services except for like showing I have a small amount of clients because I'm a solo teacher. I don't have other people with me right now. I have a small amount of clients that I keep in there that I charge regular rates for, and they know that they're being observed by students all the time. Okay. And I keep them in there so that we can have those observations in there. So I keep my skills up because I like to do it. Okay. If I had another teacher, I would be taking a whole day and probably doing a service day with nobody asking me questions except for the patient in that time frame. And I would do that. And I maybe would run a Groupon, but at this point, my Google has been well established here that I don't need to. And that was kind of the weird. It's like you have these moments where it's like, would I do it? Maybe, but I don't know if I would want to. Would I do it? We just got a laser. And if I want to like book a bunch of lasers and get people like really enthusiastic about that, and then introduce them to electrolysis and have the students clean them up, ooh, it's gonna be exciting. So I think that that's really cool. I'm just reading. I see my name over here. I like how you said you gave them a lower rate until they got to come in to 1 or 2 months, and then they paid full price. It is a way to kind of encourage them to come back in and don't book an appointment and then let them leave the office without and do the appointment. Let them leave the office without their next appointment. If you're the technician that says, call me when you have hair, then I want to encourage you not to do that. That is not a treatment plan. That is why you're wondering whether or not you're consistently full, is because you're just kind of like, just call me when you have a couple hairs. Like, what do you do then?
No, I usually, anybody that starts in my office and they do a consultation, say, you do the consultation and I want you to book the first full month of appointments at a minimum. So that could be 4 appointments in the books or whatever that needs for the treatment plan, but clients do not leave without appointments. Those that do are the ones that are going to be falling off their treatment plan and they're unhappy and they go online, say electrolysis doesn't work and 1-star reviews and that sort of thing. It all kind of snowballs.
And Gabby says that there was an electrologist in her area that filled their books in 2 months by offering a Groupon. And the email list alone is awesome. And if you're advertising yourself in a way that can encourage those people to come in there, oh, so good. So good.
So yeah, I guess if you're struggling to take in clientele and you're brand new and you don't know how you're going to fill your books, then it might be worth it to try something like a Groupon. You know, the sessions are discounted enough that maybe it helps with your feeling like you're overcharging people. But also, you know, we talked about doing grand openings, or I do think that new electrologists should not be at the top of their market. There's really nowhere to grow from there. And I think that it's also, you know, you don't have the experience to be pricing yourself at $150 an hour. That I've seen, you know, that kind of happens sometimes. And it's just, you know, I don't think that's the most ethical way to go about it. So I feel like you price yourself for your skill, but don't do it so low that you are, you know, bringing down your market either. So if it's about 110 on average, don't be 65. We don't charge 65 anymore. I charged 65, 20 years ago.
Right.
So, you need to move up from there, but don't be at 130. First of all, you're kind of outpricing yourself, but also you don't have the experience to back that up just yet. So I think it's important to kind of start a little lower than the average, do a hefty discount if you feel like you need to fill your books, do a Groupon, things like that. And then you kind of slowly work your price into the pack. And that's a good way to go about it.
I have to say, one, Gabby, congratulations on graduating in March. We are very excited for you. This is such a rewarding career. And I'm glad that this helped, because that's the whole point of this is we don't want anybody to feel alone in this industry, especially when we're solo practitioners. Also, when I heard where you're living, that's actually where I spent all of my summers growing up. So okay. In our community chat, we want you guys to pop in there and answer 2 questions on this space before we leave you for today. So first, how have you customized your consent forms to fit your practice? Are there specific resources or tips you found helpful in streamlining these documents? We would love to hear that. And so would your fellow Zappers. And then imposter syndrome. Many new practitioners struggle with feeling good enough to charge for the services, what strategies have helped you build the confidence to overcome self-doubt in your practice? So those are like, drop them in the comment section when we drop that into the community, because we want to hear what you guys have to say. I'll probably put it online tomorrow too on Instagram. So if you want to drop it in the comments there too, that'd be fun.
That's right. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week's Mentorship Hour episode. So again, if you guys have any questions for us, this is what we love to address when we're doing these. Otherwise, we pull them off anywhere else, but we would rather go with yours first. There is a discussion post in the portal where you can just drop a question. It goes right into our email, and then we draft a whole episode around it. So please go ahead and do that for us. That would be awesome. Other than that, I think we'll see you next week.
Yeah, until next time.
Same place, same time.
Same bad time. Oh, thank you for my new haircut. I'm like, I was done with long hair. We'll see you guys. Keep growing, except don't grow the hair, just so everybody knows. Just grow your
Not the hairs. We're trying to
Not the
pull. We're trying to kill the hairs. Yes.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Electrolysis Unplugged. We hope today's conversation gave you something you can take straight back to your practice. Don't forget to share this episode with a colleague. And if you're part of our mentorship community, continue the conversation with us there. Until next time.